All right, how's it going, AVC 142 friends? I'm answering your point of confusions from Module 4. Um, they're really good questions. There's 3 or 4 really good questions in there. So definitely make sure if you have anything that you're like, hey, I'm a little bit confused about this, or even if it's something that we haven't covered in this class, but you're like, you know, what the heck is this? How do you do this? Let me know. I did go through this week and I asked, what is something that you want to learn that we haven't covered yet? And I'll also cover those things in these videos. But pretty much everything that was asked for in Module 4 for things to be covered that hasn't been yet will be covered, right? I know one was about presets. I can't remember what the other. Oh, somebody said something about video. That's not going to be covered. That's the one that won't be covered. I know nothing about video. I buy expensive cameras that have video functions, and I don't know how to. I mean, I guess on my camera, I know how to flip the switch to turn it to video. I've never recorded video. I don't know anything about that stuff. I know. Um, so, but I'm sure that we do have a really, really cool class 4 video or time-based art called AVC 178. I think it's called Digital Art Studies. That's a really cool class. You would learn video. Okay, now back to the world of photo. So, somebody asked a really good question about, or just brought up the point about, the local edits being kind of tricky. Yes, the local edits are totally kind of tricky. And one reason that it's tricky is Lightroom is a software that gets updated all the time. You all might have even realized that since you've had it, it's been updated, right? And you probably, you downloaded it and you probably selected auto update. I want to say that, I mean, it's not irregular for Lightroom to be updated monthly. And so things change. That's kind of the trick about digital technology, right? When I teach my students darkroom printing, nothing really has changed in darkroom printing in the last, I don't know, 150 years. And so everything stays pretty stable. I can tell them how to do X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z is done the same way now, 1980, 2058, whatever, where digital stuff, Lightroom, changes all the time. So somebody mentioned, hey, you're using an older version of Lightroom and it's not super, doesn't cover everything. The local edits that I show you in the video are the kind of, those are the ones that have been around forever since the beginning of Lightroom. And those are the ones that you want to definitely make sure that you know. So that's the brush, okay? The brush, the gradient, the radial, and I think that's kind of it. The other ones are all use AI, which is totally fine and super useful. But the ones that you're always going to need are the brush, the radial, the gradient. Those have not changed. So I actually don't. I mean, I should update that video, but I'm kind of hesitant because it's like I update them and then like a month later it changes. But let me just go through really quick and just go through the local edits in the newest version of Lightroom. I think mine is pretty new right here that you're looking at. So if I click this, it opens here, open a new mask. So you just have to understand every time you're doing a local adjustment, you're creating a mask. And if you're somebody that learned Photoshop and then Lightroom, that's going to be really like, oh, I get this. Where if it's the other way around, it's confusing because it's probably the first time you've ever been introduced to masks. But it's something that gets used in photography a lot is masking. And so add a new mask. The top is subject, sky, background. If I look at my photo here, I chose this photo specifically because it doesn't have, it's going to use artificial intelligence to decide what the subject is. In this photo, I have a trouble saying what the subject is. I guess it's this stream. But that's me, the maker of it, saying that I'm unclear about what the subject exactly is of this photo. So I don't think subject would be the best. There is no sky in this photo, so I'm not going to choose sky. And background, what is the background, right? The background is going to be the opposite of the subject. Well, if I can't define the subject, I probably can't define the background either. So this would be an example of like, let's say that you have a portrait of a person, right? You have a portrait of a person. It's really obvious what the subject is. Click subject. It 9 times out of 10, it does an amazing job of selecting it when the subject is obvious. Background, same thing. Sky, if there's a sky in it, it does an amazing job. Here, let me pick a picture that does have a sky. Here's a photo with a sky. If I hit sky, it's going to generate a mask that did a really good job of just selecting the sky. What a useful tool that is. Now, you could do the same thing with the brush, right? So if I want to get rid of this mask, I could just go and select it. Oops. Hit minus. Oh, actually, I don't want to do that. I'm sorry. I'm confusing myself here because I'm looking at this window as small as possible. I go Control and delete mask. So I Control click. Oop, I hit duplicate. Sorry. Delete mask 1. Control. Delete mask 1 copy. Okay, so now I don't have a mask. Now, let's just say that I tried to choose. Let's actually go back to the stream photo and say, select subject. And yeah, it selected the stream. Let me check the overlay. I'm just going to put the color overlay on just so it's really obvious to see. Actually, that's kind of hard to see. Yeah, right. So it selected all of this, but not the foreground, right? So it's saying that this part of the stream is the subject. This is not the subject. Interesting. Because how it works is it's analyzing both what's in focus and where there's the area of most saturation and contrast. That's where focus lives. That's the most saturation. It might not be the most contrast, but it's the most saturation is this stream. So, right, you could totally go and add onto this mask using the brush and, you know, paint in the bottom here like this. Use a bigger brush. And all of that is the same compared to the video that I made. So I just added that onto the bottom, right? So that's one way of doing it. That's not the only way. So I'm going to get rid of this mask now. Control, delete mask 1. And, you know, I've been using this stuff before the AI stuff was integrated in. And so I kind of default to, like, I skip these ones and just go to brush. And what I like about the brush is you can kind of be sloppy with it and still make a good selection. If you keep going in photography, you're going to get to Photoshop and realize that that's not the case. You have to be kind of a little bit more precise in Photoshop. So there you go. I just made that same selection using the brush instead of the select subject and add a brush. Totally up to you, right? It's totally up to you, but that's one of the newer tools. Let me go back to the masks. Okay, so now if I wanted to add a new mask, this is my first mask. Let's actually do something with this. Let's actually just, I'm going to select this mask, turn off the overlay, and I'm going to bump the exposure up. So, I don't know, let's make it like this. Maybe change the color temperature. Let's make it kind of like that. Okay, so now let's make another mask for this cloud back here, this like smoke. So I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to say, you know, radial, object, brush, whatever you want. Let's go object, because that's a new one. I can go object and just paint over, and it's going to try to look at that information that I just painted over and try to make sense of it. Did a pretty good job, right? Just in that, it went and selected that. Now, I could go and clean up this with the brush by subtracting some of the selection or adding some of the selection. Now, I know that I'm like clicking through this and you guys are like, well, I wish it worked like that when I use it. Whenever I try to do it, it never works out that great. I totally get that. Don't get discouraged about that. That's pretty typical. So now every time you float over these, it's going to show you where that brush is selected. All right. So now if I wanted to change the exposure of just that, I could do that. I could also go in and clean that up even more because we can tell that it's kind of rough. So even though I didn't didn't show all of the newest masks, I do want you to for sure 100% know the brush, the linear gradient, the radial gradient. Those are the really important ones. The other ones are kind of like, yeah, they work awesome. Like, and don't get me wrong, I don't mean to be like discrediting those ones, because like I said, this one right here, if I hit sky, it's going to make a super clean mask super quick, right? And this is, with the landscape, you guys are working on your landscape projects right now. This is typically how you edit a landscape photo, right? You would make one edit for the sky. Let's actually darken it a little bit. And you could even go and say, control click on this mask and hit duplicate and invert mask. And so now really easily with just selecting sky, I made an edit for the sky, and now I'm making an edit for the ground, because in a landscape photo, you're typically going to be editing the ground differently than the sky. So I hope you found that useful. I know it's a little bit confusing. Don't worry if you don't have all of those down. But once again, the masks that I want you to know: brush, linear gradient, radial gradient. We're not even getting into color range and luminance range. They're pretty easy to use. But you can totally, and if you have a specific type of file, you can use depth range. Those are a little bit more advanced. If you take 143, we'll talk about those things. Okay, so I hope that helped clear up the masking local edits in Lightroom. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is somebody mentioned that they are having problems doing light writing, and somebody was saying that they were having a hard time taking star trail photos. I imagine that these are these are connected questions. I often have students that are like, hey, I want to take star trail photos. What should my settings be? I can't really tell you that because, right, our eyes are not as sensitive as our cameras are towards light. And so this idea of like, I could just tell you, oh, F8, 30 minutes at ISO 100. Like, that just doesn't, right? A dark night is pretty variable, right? It's pretty variable. There's dark nights in downtown Phoenix, and there's dark nights in the middle of the Sonoran Desert. That darkness of the two are not the same. And so, trial and error, right? We do live in a time of digital technology. You can click the photo and look on the back screen. I just want you to think about being a film photographer and zooming back 30 years when, like, you had a trial and error was take the picture, develop the film, make a print, realize that it's wrong, go back out. And so with star trail photos, I would say, I'm going to talk about aperture in a second when we talk about with light writing as well. But with shutter speed, I would say shoot for at least 30 seconds. One thing that's really useful for star trail photos is what's called an intervalometer. This is something that you can actually get off of Amazon for cheap, but it's camera specific, so you have to find the exact one for your camera. Or I should say relatively cheap. Here's one. It's called the intervalometer, $21.99, specific cameras. The way this works is you program it to say, I want to take... Oh, I'm sorry. We're getting ahead of ourselves. We're getting into some pretty complex photo compositing stuff. This is like a remote, right? So this is a remote. What I want you to know about star trail photos, when you see star trail photos like this, these are typically not one exposure. These are typically created digitally by taking up to hundreds, if not thousands of photos and photo compositing them into one photo. And so the problem is with digital technology or with film technology, we could just open the shutter for an hour, 2 hours, 5 days and make a long exposure. Digital technology, you can't do that because the sensor gets too hot. And so these are actually created as photo composites. So with that said, that's a 143 thing, but photo composite, look into that. An intervalometer, look into that. Okay, let's talk about aperture. Sorry, I know that I'm like dropping a lot of teasers here. So I would recommend everybody do this, especially if you have, one lens or whatever. Find out the sharpest aperture on your lens. So the way that I do that is I set up a little scene, usually in my backyard or something, where I put something 5 feet in front of the camera, 20 feet in front of the camera, a bunch of things throughout the scene, right? Or you could just pick things, a bush that's 5 feet away, a building that's 30 feet away, whatever. And run through all of your apertures, taking a photo with the correct exposures. So you're going to be changing aperture, shutter speed, ISO to get the correct exposures, but you're going to run through all of your apertures. And then you're going to bring them into Lightroom, and you're going to look, wrong Lightroom. Then you're going to look at them at 100%. So zoom into 100% and see which one is the sharpest. So somebody asks, I don't know what to do with my aperture for for light writing pictures. What I would say is find out your sharpest aperture. Hint, it's usually somewhere in the middle. So on a digital camera, your sharpest aperture is usually 5.6 to f11, somewhere in there. And so if you're taking long exposure photos and you want to get as much depth of field as possible, shoot for like f8. Once again, I can't tell you the secret answers right now because I'm not in the scene. All right, that was a long one, but I hope it helped y'all out.